All of the cards from the upcoming Pokemon TCG set, Scarlet and Violet Surging Sparks, have now been revealed. Our Surging Sparks set is due out November 8th, and pre-releases start in the weeks leading up to that, the last week in October and the first week of November. And our Surging Sparks set is going to be a combination of Japan's Supercharged Breaker, Paradise Dragona, and the Sylveon EX and Ceruledge EX decks. So those are going to be the cards that I'm reviewing in today's video. Before we get rolling with the set review, I want to do a quick shout out to my sponsor, FullGripGames.com. If you're looking to get your hands on all of the coolest new cards from Surging Sparks as soon as possible, make sure to check out the Surging Sparks pre-orders available now at FullGripGames.com. Shopping at Full Grip Games directly supports the content that I create here on Tricky Gym. Thank you so much for buying and selling at FullGripGames.com. Let's start things off with a big eggy boy, Exeggutor, a Stage 1 Grass-type Pokemon with 130 hit points. It's got the Explosion Hour attack, which costs 1 Grass energy, and it says flip a coin for each energy attached to each active Pokemon. This attack does 60 damage for each heads. This is a very silly attack, and it's not very good. There's also a new Durant EX, basic grass-type Pokemon with 190 hit points and the Sudden Scrape ability, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may use this ability, discard the top card of your opponent's deck. It's a Mill 1 on a basic Pokemon EX. You don't have to attack to disrupt your opponent's resources. That's nice. But it is a pretty weak mill at a mill of 1. Revenge Crash costs a grass and 2 colorless energy and does 120 damage plus 30 more damage for each prize card your opponent has taken. So it's really not the strongest attack. I wouldn't build a deck around trying to utilize Revenge Crash. At most, if your opponent has taken 4 prizes, you're going to be doing 240 damage, but at the beginning of the game, you're really not doing a lot. I don't think that Revenge Crash is all that great. There are much stronger attackers in Standard. Sudden Scrape is interesting, though. If you bench 4 Durant EX in the same turn, then that's a mill 4. There is a far better way to mill your opponent's deck in Standard formats, and that is Great Tusk. Great Tusk is definitely the premier mill deck in Standard right now, and I don't think Durant EX really adds anything to the equation. Why not both? I'll tell you exactly why. You wouldn't even want to play this in your Great Tusk deck because it's a 2-prize liability. When you're trying to mill your opponent out of cards in their deck, you really want to make the game last as long as possible, and by giving your opponent a target to knock out that gives up 2 prize cards, you're accelerating the pace of the game, and you are giving yourself less turns to run your opponent out of cards. So Durant EX is like working against the strategy that you're trying to go for. In what reality are we winning any games of Pokemon cards with this? It looks like the Wo-Chen here is kind of supposed to be played with the Rabsca. They both have these attacks that do more if you have 3 or fewer cards left in your deck. I think this kind of strategy is terrible. Rabsca only has 70 hit points in a Dusknoir meta, just not viable. And the Sudden Twist attack does 40 damage plus 200 more damage if you have 3 or fewer cards in your deck. You got to get all the way to the bottom of your deck, and then you're doing 240 damage for 1 grass energy, which is decent, but there are just way better ways to deal that much damage. The Wo-Chen has the Green Hazard attack, which does 20 damage, and if you have 3 or fewer cards in your deck, the attack does 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And you know who does damage to benched Pokemon way easier than that? Radiant Greninja, right? So just just use Radiant Greninja instead. Its Moonlight Shuriken attack does 90 damage to 2 targets, and you don't have to have just 3 cards left in your deck in order to use it. Victini always has a fun ability. This Victini has the Victory Cheer ability, which says attacks used by your Evolution Fire Pokemon do 10 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So, if you want to increase your Evolved Fire Pokemon's attacks by 10 damage, all you have to do is put a Victini on your bench. You could put up to 4 Victini on your bench. That's doing a lot, but you could. I don't really think that there's a huge application for this Victini in standard format right now, but damage fixing is always nice, and these kinds of cards have seen play throughout the game's history when you have to hit relevant numbers with specific attackers. Incineroar! My chatters are telling me that Victini can help boost the damage output of Incineroar EX and Cinderace EX. This is true. However, both Cinderace EX and Incineroar EX are bad Pokemon cards, and Victini is not fixing it. Here we go. This is the combo. All right, we found it, folks. Centiskorch with Scovillain EX. This is the deck. All right. You can use Centiskorch's Burning Fever attack to do 130 damage, and then 30 damage to each of your benched Pokemon, and then Scovillain EX Spicy Rage, 10 damage, plus 70 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So, if you used Centiskorch's Burning Fever and put 3 damage counters on a bench Scovillain EX, you're going to be doing 220 damage for 2 fire energy. If you used Magma Basin to accelerate a fire energy to your Scovillain EX, that's 2 more damage counters on that thing, which is 140 more damage, which means, holy smokes, actually, you're going to be doing that's 360 damage with your Scovillain EX. All right, this is actually kind of cool, I think. This is just silly enough to work. Skeledirge. Stage 2 Fire-type Pokemon with the Unaware ability, which prevents all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon. So that means if you have Skeledirge on the bench, Dragapult EX cannot target it with damage counters placed or anything like that. It's got the Flare Recital attack. This is just Palkia V-Star. Yeah, this I knew this was familiar. If you've got a whole bunch of bench Pokemon, your opponent's got a whole bunch of bench Pokemon, I mean, you could do over 300 damage. Most of the time, you're not going to be doing that much, though. It's a stage 2 Pokemon. Its attack costs 2 energy. It's a lot to ask. Throughout this review, you will hear me refer to cards that are good or at least considerations in Gym Leader Challenge formats. Gym Leader Challenge is my favorite way to play Pokemon cards. You can learn all about it at gymleaderchallenge.com. But what makes Gym Leader Challenge so different than standard formats is that there are no rule box cards allowed in Gym Leader Challenge format. So no Pokemon EX, no Radiant Pokemon, Pokemon V-Star, or anything like that. So the power level is much different in Gym Leader Challenge than it is in Standard. There's a new Armarouge Stage 1 Fire-type Pokemon with the Crimson Blaster attack. Costs 2 fire and a colorless. Discard all fire energy from this Pokemon, and the attack does 180 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This kind of attacker is not viable in Standard formats, which is way too aggressive, but in Gym Leader Challenge formats, this is an okay attacker. I do prefer Heat more in Gym Leader Challenge format with the exciting Flame attack, which does 90 damage and 180 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. For 6 energy, you do have to have 6 energy attached to the Heatmore, or you could just have Charizard from Pokemon Go set up, which doubles up your energy with its Burn Brightly ability. that's just a better route to go in Gym Leader Challenge formats. And what bothers me about the Armarouge is that Crimson Blaster only damages your opponent's benched Pokemon. Sometimes you're going to want to just deal damage to the Pokemon that's right in front of you in the active spot. And the fact that Crimson Blaster can't hit that Pokemon is kind of annoying. Ceruledge is interesting. It's a Fire-type Pokemon with 140 hit points and the Blaze Curse attack, which costs 1 colorless energy and discards all special energy from each of your opponent's Pokemon. You read that right, folks. All special energy, not just one from each. What application does this attack have? Against a Lugia deck, it's kind of funny, but Lugia V-Star decks do play a ton of energy cards, like 17 or so. It's going to be very difficult to run a Lugia deck out of energy, but you could try. This attack is pretty much exclusively good against Lugia in Standard. Ceruledge does have the Black Flame Slash attack, which does 160 damage for 2 fire and a colorless energy, and the drawback being during your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. I do think that this card is much stronger in Gym Leader Challenge format than it is in Standard. Blaze Curse can be extraordinarily disruptive in Gym Leader Challenge formats where many decks rely on special energy. Ceruledge and Armarouge, both interesting cards for Gym Leader Challenge, but not particularly strong enough for Standard. In Standard, I would just play Enhanced Hammer instead of wasting an attack using Blaze Curse. Milotic EX is a Stage 1 Water-type Pokemon EX with 270 hit points and the Sparkling Scales ability, which prevents all damage and effects done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Tera Pokemon's attacks. This is interesting because Tera Pokemon are very strong right now, and a lot of decks feature almost exclusively Tera Pokemon. This card could be strong in those wall decks. There was the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon stall deck that played the Noivern EX. Milotic EX could be another wall that is difficult for some decks to get through. I think that cards like Mimikyu are better than Milotic EX because Mimikyu can't be damaged by all Pokemon EX, where Milotic is only being protected from Tera Pokemon. Your opponent could just attack with a regular Pokemon EX and damage Milotic EX. That's at least interesting, and some people are going to be into it. Chien-pao is a very good card. It's got the Snow Sink ability, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may discard a stadium in play. And if there becomes a time where stadium cards are very problematic and you need to remove them, having a card in your deck that can be searched out with an Ultra Ball that can remove stadiums is just a powerful option. We saw this during the Sword and Shield era with Pumpkaboo that has the Pumpkin Pit ability. That card was very good. Before that, Resetting Hole Marshadow was incredible for removing stadium cards from play. I think that Chien-pao will be a great inclusion in decks that wants to remove stadiums reliably without needing to rely on Lost Vacuum. Pikachu EX is a crazy Pokemon card, and that's awesome because Pikachu is kind of the poster Pokemon, not only of Surging Sparks, but also the entire Pokemon franchise. Pikachu EX is a Tera Pokemon, basic, 200 HP, and the absolutely mind-blowing Tenacious Heart ability, which says if this Pokemon has full HP and would be knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, it is not knocked out, and its remaining hit points becomes 10 instead. It's like a built-in Focus Sash. It's a built-in survivability mechanic. It's just crazy. I mean, we live in a one-hit KO format. Standard format is a hyper-aggressive, one-hit knockout format where decks like Raging Bolt are going to be blasting your Pokemon EX every single turn for huge one-hit KOs. As evidence of that, Pikachu EX is also a one-hit KO Pokemon. It's got the Topaz Bolt attack for a grass, a lightning, and a metal energy, which does 300 damage, with the downside that you have to discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. What does this card bring to standard formats? Well, first of all, Miraidon decks are playing this pretty terrible Mewtwo EX right now, just because it's a Tera Pokemon that happens to be lightning type, and Miraidon can search it out with tandem units, so that Miraidon decks can use Area 0 Underdepths and expand their bench to 8. Pikachu EX will instantly replace that Mewtwo EX in all Miraidon decks. That Mewtwo EX takes Psychic Energy to attack, and Miraidon decks don't play any Psychic Energy. That thing is just there to provide a Tera type for the bench so that Area 0 Underdepths can be played. Pikachu EX has a very expensive attack: grass, lightning, and metal. And Miraidon decks will just include Pikachu EX because it is a strict upgrade on the terrible Mewtwo EX, even if Miraidon EX decks are not including the grass, lightning, and metal energy in order to attack with Pikachu. The fact that Pikachu is tough to knock out because of its Tenacious Heart ability and has just a single retreat cost, that's great. You're even going to have situations in Miraidon decks where you can't take a knockout on a specific turn because maybe you're behind on energy or you got your hand disrupted or whatever, and you could even just send up Pikachu EX to try and buy a turn. Now, as far as attacking with Pikachu EX, this is also a viable option. We do have the Joltik from the last sets that accelerates up to 2 grass and 2 lightning energy from your deck to your benched Pokemon in any way you like. That fulfills a lot of the energy requirement for Topaz Bolt. So you could use Joltik to accelerate energy onto Pikachu EX. You could also pair Pikachu EX with Blissey EX. Blissey EX has the Happy Switch ability, which allows you to move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. And the way this engine works is that you use the Glass Trumpet card to accelerate energy from your discard pile to Blissey, and then you use Blissey's Happy Switch ability to move energy from your Blissey to your Pikachu EX, and then you blammo Topaz Bolt turn after turn. Now that is a decent amount to set up, but what's cool about this deck is that both Pikachu EX and Blissey EX are tough to knock out. Blissey EX has 300 hit points, so it's kind of a beef monster. And then Pikachu EX has the Tenacious Heart ability, which makes it naturally hard to knock out. And you can only use Glass Trumpet if you have a Tera Pokemon in play. Pikachu EX is a Tera Pokemon, but you can only accelerate energy to your benched colorless Pokemon, and Blissey EX is a colorless Pokemon. This Magneton is one of my favorite cards from Surging Sparks. I think this card is so cool, and I love it. It's got the Overvolt Discharge ability, which says once during your turn, you may attach up to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your lightning Pokemon in any way you like. If you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. This is a very strong ability. We've seen how powerful these abilities can be that knock out your own Pokemon. Dusknoir is all over the place in standard format right now. Previously, there was a Mismagius with the Mysterious Message ability, which was used in standard format during the time that it was legal. Magneton fits right into that category with those powerful cards that knock themselves out and give you a board state advantage. Getting 3 basic energy from the discard pile and attaching them to your lightning Pokemon, well, that's just fantastic. For Pikachu EX, you could use Overvolt Discharge to get a Topaz Bolt out of nowhere. It doesn't say that you have to accelerate lightning energy from the discard pile, just basic energy, so you could accelerate a grass, lightning, and a metal straight to your Pikachu EX at the expense of a prize card and fire off a game-winning Topaz Bolt. You could also play Magneton in a Miraidon EX deck. Miraidon EX decks only have Electric Generator to accelerate energy into play right now, and In standard format, it's a very 2-4-6 format. And what I mean by that is that decks are trying to win in 3 or 4 turns by taking 2 prizes, then 2 more prizes, then 2 more prizes. So a lot of times taking a single prize doesn't really help towards the prize race, because that would require that you take a single prize, and then if you take 2 and then you take 2, then you've only taken 5 prizes and you haven't won the game. So it's ideal to take 2, 4, and then 6. So a lot of times giving your opponent a single prize card doesn't actually assist them in their quest to win the game, since they are trying to go 2, 4, 6 to win. Overvolt Discharge could be great for those Miraidon decks, because it can give you that boost of energy at the end of the game if you're trying to take a key knockout. It could allow Miraidon EX decks to start playing Raichu V again. Raichu V is a card that some Miraidon decks play, but not many anymore, because it's just really difficult to have enough energy in play in order to use Dynamic Spark effectively. But with the Magneton, you could just blast 3 energy into play to take a game-winning knockout with Raichu V. You discard all energy from your lightning Pokemon and then do 60 damage for each energy you discarded. Magneton could also be used to throw a bunch of energy on an Iron Hands for a game-winning amp you very much at the end of the game if you want to knock out a low HP Pokemon for bonus prizes. I think that Magneton is just a very useful card in those lightning type decks, even if you're playing just a 1/1 line in the Miraidon decks. In Gym Leader Challenge format, Magneton is also going to be a very powerful option for decks. Overvolt Discharge can allow you to quickly power up an attacker and can also unlock cards like Counter Energy. So I think that this Magneton will be super good in GLC decks as well. This Magneton is such a powerful card that it did play a role in the amazing Raikou card getting banned from Gym Leader Challenge format, as it would have been far too easy to board wipe the opponent with Overvolt Discharge onto Amazing Raikou and then amazing shots for 2 prizes. So Magneton, I do think, still has a lot of powerful targets in Gym Leader Challenge formats and will be good in both Standard and GLC. I love it when a Stage 1 Pokemon is better than its Stage 2 counterpart. That's something that gets me going, gets me excited. Oh yeah, more cards for control decks. Love it. Do I love it? I don't know. 80 hit point basic Pokemon with the Crash Pulse attack. Costs 1 lightning energy, and it says your opponent reveals their hand, and you can discard any items and tool cards you find there. That is a very powerful effect on an attack. We've already seen how strong a card like Airy is, and Airy has taken control decks by storm. It has been absolutely amazing for those control strategies at limiting your opponent's options, discarding switch cards, discarding rare candies, all that. Now we've got that effect, but even more juiced up on a single prize Pokemon, and it costs just 1 lightning energy. A ridiculous attack. This Tapu Koko is actually really good in Gym Leader Challenge format. It's got 120 HP and 2 very relevant attacks. Call for Thunder costs 1 colorless energy and allows you to search your deck for up to 2 lightning Pokemon and put them into your hand. And then its second attack, Prize Counter, costs 2 lightning and a colorless energy, and it does 90 damage plus 90 more damage if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. There's not a lot of lightning Pokemon in Gym Leader Challenge format that deal 180 damage for just 3 energy. That's just good damage output, and a lot of lightning decks will go behind in prizes early with the intention of catching up later in the game, so Prize Counter could be an effective way to clap back after you take an early deficit. You could also use the Magneton to force Prize Counter to do more damage as well. Blowing up the Magneton, giving your opponent a prize, then bam, Prize Counter for 180 damage. Call for Thunder is also just a great setup attack in Gym Leader Challenge format. For 1 colorless energy, you can search your deck for 2 lightning Pokemon. Zebstrika is the quintessential consistency Pokemon for lightning decks and Gym Leader Challenge formats, and then a lot of GLC decks also play the Flaffy or Electric with the Dynamotor abilities. You could use Call for Thunder to go get a turn 2 Zebstrika and Flaffy. Then you're ready to start using Dynamotor to accelerate energy into play. You're ready to use Zebstrika to sprint through your deck, and it's only got a retreat cost of 1. There is another popular Tapu Koko that sees play in Gym Leader Challenge format right now, Flying Flip Tapu Koko. This is a staple in almost all lightning decks right now. It's a free retreater, and Flying Flip is just great spread damage for 2 colorless energy. I actually think that this Tapu Koko is powerful enough to rival the deck space that this Tapu Koko preoccupies, because in Gym Leader Challenge format, it's a singleton format, so you can only play 1 of each card with the same name, except for basic energy in your deck. So you have to choose which Tapu Koko you would want to play in your lightning type deck. Having a retreat cost of 1 isn't as good as free retreat, but a lot of these decks are playing U-turn board, and Tapu Koko does get free retreat with U-turn board attached. U-turn board is played in a lot of these decks because it decreases your retreat cost by 1 while not getting discarded when your opponent plays Field Blower to remove it. It'll come back to your hand because that's the effect on U-turn board. So Tapu Koko, great setup card, great attacker. I like this card for Lightning GLC decks. Miraidon's got a new card, 120 hit point, single prize, future Pokemon with 2 attacks. Its first attack, Protection Code, costs a lightning and a colorless energy. It does 40 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage done to your future Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX. If this Pokemon leaves the active spot, this effect stops working. You had me until that last line. Honestly, kind of an interesting attack, except that last line makes it completely terrible and, in my opinion, unusable. Protection Code would be cool because you can use your Iron Crown to boost the damage that Protection Code is doing. With 4 Iron Crown on your bench, you're going to be dealing plus 80 damage. That's 120 damage with Protection Code, and then your future Pokemon can't be damaged by your opponent's Pokemon EX. But the fact that, like, what's the point of protecting your future Pokemon from Pokemon EX if when your opponent uses Boss's Orders or uses Prime Catcher to bring up one of your bench Pokemon, the Protecting Code does not protect you anymore? It's just ridiculous. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible attack. Because if you've got your Iron Crown on the bench to boost your Protection Code damage output, your opponent can just use Prime Catcher or Boss's Orders or Counter Catcher, bring them into the active spot, then they are no longer protected, then they could just knock out your 2 prize Pokemon. So I think this card is terrible. I think this Togekiss is totally bananas. I mean, first of all, coin flip cards are fun, and they make for fantastic and silly content. There will certainly be lots of silly content involving this Togekiss. Togekiss is a Stage 2 Psychic-type Pokemon with 140 hit points and the Wonder Kiss ability, which says whenever your opponent's active Pokemon gets knocked out, flip a coin. If heads, take 1 more prize card for that knockout. This ability does not stack. And then its attack Speed Wing does 140 damage for 3 colorless energy. This is crazy. It says whenever your opponent's active Pokemon gets knocked out. So that means even if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out by a Dusknoir, you still get to flip for Wonder Kiss. Now, it is worth noting that if you use Dusknoir to knock out one of your opponent's benched Pokemon, you don't get to flip for Wonder Kiss. You only flip for Wonder Kiss if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out. Togekiss, I think, is just okay in standard format. In standard format, as I already said, decks are trying to go 2-4-6, and almost every strategy in standard format right now is built to win the game in 3 or 4 turns at the latest. In fact, if you're winning the game on turn 4, you're really late to the party. Winning on turn 3 is kind of all the rage right now, especially with Dusknoir and all of that. Winning on turn 4 is like the absolute end of the road. You have to have won the game by turn 4, or else what are you doing? The typical prize race in standard format right now is 2-4-6, as I said before. You try to knock out 3 2-prize Pokemon back to back to back, or use Iron Hands to knock out a single prize Pokemon for 2 prizes, or use Dusknoir to knock out a single prize Pokemon while your attacker knocks out a single prize Pokemon. Togekiss, in some situations, could allow you to win the game in 3 turns instead of 4, if you're lucky and you flip back-to-back heads. If you take a knockout on a 2-prize Pokemon on turn 2, while also getting Togekiss into play, and you flip a heads, you'll take 3 prizes against that 2-prize Pokemon instead of 2, and then if you do it again the following turn, then boom, you won the game. That's not very likely, though. And what's more likely is that even if you set up that Togekiss, you flip 1 heads and 1 tails, which means that you took 3 prizes on a 2-prizer, and then you took 2 prizes on a 2-prizer, and then you still have to take 1 more knockout. So on average, Togekiss is not helping you win a game of Standard. And I hope that makes sense. But where it does make a difference is in Gym Leader Challenge format. And I know I sound like a broken record, but it's true. Most cards released in any Pokemon TCG set are just going to be bulk and Standard. That's just the reality of the situation. In Gym Leader Challenge format, though, many, many more cards have a chance to shine because Rulebox Pokemon are not legal for play. So in Gym Leader Challenge format, Togekiss is actually a really, really powerful option. And the reason it's so good is because in Gym Leader Challenge format, every knockout is a single prize take. So you have to take 6 knockouts in order to win. 6. So if you flip 1 heads throughout those 6 knockouts with Togekiss in play, that skips you ahead an entire turn, which makes a huge difference in Gym Leader Challenge format. That can speed up a 8-turn game to a 7-turn game, or it can turn, a 9-turn game into an 8-turn game. If you flip 2 heads, it can take an 8-turn game and turn it into a 6-turn game. So that makes an incredible amount of difference in Gym Leader Challenge format. And what's crazy about the Togekiss is that it is also a relevant attacker in Gym Leader Challenge format because Speedwing does 140 damage for 3 colorless energy. With Dimension Valley in play, you can use Speedwing for just 2 colorless energy. You could also power up Speedwing with a single reversal energy. And 140 damage is just very relevant damage output in Gym Leader Challenge format, as it's going to take a lot of key knockouts against 130 hit point attackers. Many attackers in Gym Leader Challenge format have exactly 130 HP. Togekiss having 140 hit points itself with just a single retreat cost is just fantastic stats on what I consider to be a very strong card for GLC. This Meowstic is kind of funny. It's got the Tempting Tail ability, which says you must discard a relaxing teaser from your hand in order to use this ability, and then you can switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. As if the format needed more ways to bring your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active spot. We've already got Counter Catcher, Pokemon Catcher, Prime Catcher, and Boss's Orders, and the new Lycia supporter that comes out in this set as well. Do we really need another way to gust up those bench Pokemon? The answer is no. And Meowstic is honestly one of the worst ways to bring your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active spot. You're better off using any of those aforementioned cards, Pokemon Catcher, Prime Catcher, Counter Catcher, or Boss's Orders. Relaxing Teaser is not a good card either, so if you do want to use that Meowstic, you have to include this terrible card in your deck. It's an item card that you can only use if you go second and only on your first turn. I hate cards like that. They're miserably designed. If I could have one wish, it would be that the Pokemon Company Stop printing cards that you can only use on the first turn. And what's worse than a card that you can only use on the first turn of the game is a card that you can only use on the first turn of the game and only if you're going second. It's just miserable card design. Why would you put so many bad dead cards in your deck? I hate it. Anyways, you put an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon into their hand. Sure, it's a catch-up mechanic. Oh, you get to undo your opponent's energy attachment, but only on the first turn of the game and only if you are going second. You've got the relaxing teaser, and you have to discard the relaxing teaser in order to use it as a gust card. I still don't like that you can't use the card. You can't burn it. You can't play it without using Tempting Tail at some point later in the game. This is an item-based gust effect, but you have to have a stage 1 Pokemon set up in order to use it. I don't think that this strategy is as good as just good old boss's orders or good old prime catcher. Like I said, a game of Pokemon cards, 4 turns. You can use prime catcher on one of those turns to gust. You can use boss's orders on another one of those turns to gust pretty easily. You could use Pokemon catcher. I don't think that it's worth setting up a stage 1 in order to then, have the item-based gust. I just don't think that it's worth it. Pallosand EX. Big boy, 280 hit point Tera Pokemon EX. And it's got 2 attacks. Sand Tomb does 160 damage for 3 colorless energy, and the defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn. Then Barite Jail costs a water, a psychic, and a fighting energy, and it places damage counters on each of your opponent's benched Pokemon until its remaining HP is 100. And I know what you're thinking. Wow, that attack's cool. Maybe I can win games with it. It's a terrible attack. It's really, really bad. In fact, this card, as handsome as it is pure bulk. And the reason for that is that Barite Jail doesn't actually do anything. If your opponent's got Charmanders on their bench, Barite Jail does nothing to it. If your opponent has Charmeleon on their bench, Barite Jail does nothing to it. The only thing that Barite Jail realistically does is that it places damage counters on bigger Pokemon like Charizard EX and Pidgeot EX. And then maybe you could use Devolution TM in order to devolve them and maybe take a couple of single prizes. But, as I said before, Pokemon TCG, 4 turns to win. There are so many better ways to spread damage and then use Devolution TM. And the better ways to do that are Dusknoir and Dragapult. So what makes Pallosand EX better than Dusknoir and Dragapult? Nothing, actually. Nothing, which is why this card's unplayable. Donphan, always good for an extremely handsome Pokemon card. This one is no exception. 150 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Overwhelm, does 40 damage, and this attack's damage is not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. Okay. And then Guard Rolling costs a fighting and 2 colorless energy, does 120 damage. You have to discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, and during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 100 less damage from attacks. So in standard format, not happening. But in Gym Leader Challenge format, okay, I'll buy it. 120 damage. You could discard a double colorless energy or a twin energy from it, and then you take 100 less damage. Many things are not knocking you out if you're taking 100 less damage. You could put a rock chest plate on it and make it take 130 less damage from attacks. You could put a stone fighting energy attached to it, make it take 150 less damage from attacks. I mean, now we're getting close to a point where some decks are not going to be able to damage it at all. You could play Lake Acuity as well. With Lake Acuity, you could take 170 less damage. Woo-wee! Okay, you have my interest. Everybody wants to talk about Gastrodon, and that's because at first glance, Gastrodon seems extremely broken. Upon closer inspection, we will come to realize that this card is not as good as it seems. It's got 130 hit points. First of all, that's a problem, but we'll get to that. It's got 130 HP and the Sticky Bind ability, which says if this Pokemon is on your bench, benched stage 2 Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, have no abilities. You see what I mean? You read that and you're like, wow, that's kind of broken. But there's a lot of qualifications that make this card not good. So let's get into it. First of all, Gastrodon only works if it's on your bench. So if your opponent brings it into the active spot, its sticky bind ability stops working. Second of all, it also only works against your opponent's benched stage 2 Pokemon. So if your opponent is using their abilities in the active spot, then Gastrodon doesn't stop it either. So let's think through this. Does Gastrodon counter Dusknoir? Well, Dusknoir is a card that you can use from the active spot very easily because after a KO, you can just promote Dusknoir, and then you can use Dusknoir's Curse Blast ability in the active spot to KO Gastrodon because Gastrodon only has 130 HP, and then Gastrodon's no longer a problem. And you can use Curse Blast from the active spot and then promote whatever attacker you want. There's also the problem that if you use Prime Catcher, Boss's Orders, anything like that, to bring Gastrodon into the active spot, then you can use your bench Dusknoir to knock it out, and then your opponent has to promote another Pokemon, and then you can knock that one out too. So that's also an issue. So it doesn't do a great job at countering Dusknoir because if your opponent just gets a Dusknoir into the active spot, then you're out of luck. Does Gastrodon counter Charizard EX? Well, Charizard EX can be used from the active spot. So in a way, Gastrodon could make it somewhat annoying because sometimes Charizard EX has to use its ability on the bench in order to get a fire energy to the active to retreat into the Charizard. So there's that minor inconvenience for Charizard decks. But if Charizard happens to find a fire energy, they can just retreat the active into Charmander, then go Rare Candy Charizard, and then they can just use their ability to accelerate energy into play. So at most, a minor inconvenience. Does Gastrodon counter Pidgeot EX? No, because Pidgeot EX has free retreat. So it's actually one of the easiest stage 2 Pokemon to use from the active spot because anytime your opponent takes a knockout, you can just promote Pidgeot EX, use its quick search ability, and then free retreat into whatever attack you want to use. Gastrodon does have some perks, okay? I don't want to completely write the card off. Gastrodon is quite good against Lugia, all right? Archeops does not love having to be in the active spot in order to use its Primal Turbo ability. It does not, okay? So Gastrodon does actually do a pretty good job of stopping Archeops by making it super awkward for Archeops to be able to actually accelerate energy into play. Gastrodon is also annoyingly good against Baxcalibur. I mean, having to have Baxcalibur in the active spot if you're playing like a chien-pao deck, that's turbo annoying. Now, I've got lots of people in the chat talking about, what about Fluttermane? What about Fluttermane? What about Fluttermane? What if I have a Gastrodon on the bench and I've got Fluttermane in the active spot? Haha! That's right. Perfect lock. Not exactly. All right, so then what are you doing? What is your strategy, right? Fluttermane has the Midnight Fluttering ability, which says as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon has no abilities. And then you've got Gastrodon, which stops your abilities from your opponent's stage 2 Pokemon on the bench. So what that means is that if you can keep Fluttermane in the active and your opponent never uses Boss's Orders or anything scary like that, or Iron Bundle, you have Gastrodon on the bench, you could shut down stage 2 Pokemon's abilities except for when they have Boss's Orders or Prime Catcher. How are you beating a deck like Raging Bolt? What are we doing here? how are you beating a deck like Roaring Moon EX, Miraidon? What are we even conceptually doing against any deck that attacks with basic Pokemon? And then when it comes to Stage 2 Pokemon, if you're attacking with Fluttermane, in earnest, if you are attacking with Fluttermane, and you're like, well, I'm just going to Hex Hurl him to death. It's a 3 energy attack that does 90 damage and 2 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon. Dude, I can just manually attach to a Charizard and beat you. Like, I don't even need Charizard's ability, dog. I'm just going to go attach, knockout. Fluttermane ain't doing squat. Oh, what if I have Alakazam EX on my bench and I have Dimensional Hand and I can use Alakazam on the bench while Fluttermane's in the active, and then I have also got Gastrodon and I'm doing 120 damage. Is it worth it? No. Maybe Gastrodon will have some existence in some sort of deck as a tech for some specific matchup. I could see Gastrodon seeing play to limit Lugia's effectiveness. I could legitimately see that because Gastrodon is quite good against Lugia. Outside of that, I don't think Gastrodon is all that great. It's not as good as it reads. That's kind of the moral of the story. I think it's just okay. All right, all you ancient box enjoyers out there, fine, you got a new toy. I don't think that Ancient Box is a great deck in Standard, but it certainly has its fans and its believers, and Koraidon is a nice addition to the Ancient Box card pool. It's got the Intense Assault attack, which costs 2 colorless energy and does 30 damage plus 150 more damage if one of your other ancient Pokemon used an attack during your last turn. This is great for knocking out Iron Hands EX, for knocking out Terapagos EX. Any fighting weak Pokemon, Koraidon's going to be just smacking it, which is great. And since Ancient Box decks use basic Darkness Energy and Sada's Vitality to accelerate energy into play, you're going to be swinging for the full 180 damage, though you could use Double Turbo to use this attack. You're probably not doing that, so 180 damage is decent damage output for the Koraidon. I could see Ancient Box decks playing like 2 of these, and it'll take key knockouts against fighting weak Pokemon. So it's a nice tool for Ancient Box decks. Hydreigon EX is a new Stage 2 Darkness-type Pokemon with 330 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack does 200 damage for Darkness and a colorless energy, and you get to discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Its second attack, Obsidian, costs a Psychic, a Darkness, a Metal, and a colorless energy. It does 130 damage and 130 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This is a very Hydreigon card. This is like your Hydreigon enjoyer's Hydreigon card for sure. It's the destruction Pokemon, and this is a very destructive card indeed. 200 damage for 2 energy, and you discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. It's like a little bit of everything. You got a little bit of mill going on, you got a little bit of decent damage output, and you got a little bit of beef, 330 HP, and you got a little bit of spread attack. Obsidian can do 130 damage to 3 targets. How are we winning games with this? And does Hydreigon EX do anything better than anything else? And when you're trying to build a game-winning strategy, that's usually what you're looking for. You want to find something that does something better than other cards. Off the bat, it feels to me like Hydreigon EX isn't the best mill card, isn't the best attacker, and isn't the best spread card. But it does do all 3. It is unique in that it mills, it does some decent damage output, and it can spread. That's what makes it unique, is that it can do all of those. But is it doing any of them better than the already existent cards? As far as milling your opponent out, you're probably better off using a single prize Pokemon. As I said earlier when talking about Durant, it's just it's a better strategy to use a card like Great Tusk and only offer up a single prize Pokemon every time you attack, because Great Tusk can start milling on the first turn of the game and then is only giving up a single prize at a time. So it's just a more consistent strategy for running your opponent out of resources. Great Tusk also mills 4 cards. Hydreigon only mills 3. Hydreigon does kind of pressure your opponent's attacker, though, forcing them to have to build up new attackers back-to-back turns. But since Hydreigon does give up 2 prizes, your opponent can just win the game in like 3 or 4 turns, because they can just knock out Hydreigon, and then the game's over. At best, maybe you got to mill maybe 9, maybe 12 cards from your opponent's deck. You know, there is that possibility, but I don't think that the mill factor is like the strongest part about this card. 200 damage certainly isn't the strongest part about this card either. 200 damage can be buffed if you happen to be playing the Binding Mochi and you want to play Pecharunt EX. You could poison your own Hydreigon, put it into the active spot, and you could do 240 damage with Crashing Heads, which is better than 200. So it is nice to be able to fix that math and do a little bit more damage if you happen to be playing the Binding Mochi. Obsidian is an interesting attack. 130 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon, 130 to the active, 130 to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This is an extremely steep attack cost. I mean, a Psychic, a Metal, a Darkness, and a Colorless. This is the kind of attack cost where if you manage to pull it off, you are going to want to win the game with an Obsidian attack. You probably want to try and use Obsidian maybe twice and just win the game with it. You could play the Crystal Ace spec with Hydreigon EX to make its attack cost 1 less. You could use Crispin to help get energy onto it. You could use Dark Patch to help get energy onto it. But keep in mind what we're doing. We're talking about playing Crispin and Dark Patch with our Stage 2 Pokemon. And if you look at other Stage 2 Pokemon that have tried to use other forms of acceleration to do big damage or lots of things, I mean, think about Cinderace, right? Cinderace EX is kind of like a prime example, because people thought Cinderace was going to be good, but it's not good. And the reason it's not good is because it takes time to evolve your Stage 2 Pokemon into play, and then you have to play cards to accelerate energy onto them. And that usually happens by maybe turn 3 at the fastest. So in an ideal world, you get all your basics out turn 1. And then you go Rare Candy and maybe you evolve, a Stage 2 Pokemon into play. But you probably don't have all of the energy to attach to it yet. So that's going to be happening on turn 3. By the time turn 3 rolls around, the game is almost entirely over in standard format. I think that's like the thing. It's really hard for people to wrap their mind around right now. Games only last 4 turns. The game is 3/4 of the way over. If you don't start attacking until turn 3, that game is almost over. That game is almost over. That's how fast standard format is right now. Dragapult EX only really became playable once the Crystal came out. Dragapult EX was not very good before that Crystal came out. Now that Dragapult EX can attack for a single energy, that means that it's a playable Stage 2 Pokemon because it can attack on turn 2. That's what makes Dragapult so good, and you're spreading damage. This thing is not attacking until turn 3 at the best. You're probably not attacking till turn 3. I really don't think that you're going to be you're not getting Obsidian on turn 2. It's not happening. With Crystal, you could get a turn 2 Crashing Heads, 200 damage, discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. But let me ask you, is it better to do a turn 2 attack with Dragapult, where you're doing 200 damage and spreading 6 damage counters to your opponent's bench? Or is it better to get a turn 2 Crashing Heads, where you're doing 200 damage and discarding the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck? Which one of those attacks is more likely going to lead you to a victory. And I think you're lying to yourself if you don't say it's Dragapult, right? Because discarding the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck is not actively helping you chase the win condition, because Hydreigon is probably not going to be a mill deck. Obsidian is a crazy spread attack, and if you pull off the turn 3 Obsidian, that could be very good. The downside of Obsidian is that it is damage dealt. You can't use Obsidian to damage benched Tera Pokemon. So that's a huge downside. You can't hit into benched Teal Mask, Ogerpon, benched Charizards, benched Dragapults, none of that, because they have the built-in Tera effect, which says that if they're on the bench, they can't be damaged by your opponent's attacks. So you can only use that to pick off smaller threats or non-Tera Pokemon. By turn 3 that you would be using, this is best case scenario, you're using turn 3 Obsidian. This is best case, that's like the dream scenario. It's more likely it'd be turn 4. Turn 3, many of your opponent's Pokemon are already like fully evolved up. So you're getting Obsidian by the time all of your opponent's Pokemon are already evolved up. It just is, it's not the best way to win a game. There are better spread attackers in the format. Radiant Greninja, Dusknoir, Dragapult. These are the premier spread attacks in the format. They are easier to use, and they are going to be, therefore, more effective. I promise you, you'll see some YouTube videos out there showing off Hydreigon and getting crazy win conditions with Obsidian. It's going to happen. You could even play Hydreigon with Dusknoir and do total board wipes, 6 prize turns in a single turn. Yeah, okay. But is it going to be a strategy that actually performs at tournaments? Absolutely not. Pecharunt is finally getting an official set release in Surging Sparks. It's got the Toxic Subjugation ability, which says as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, put 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon during Pokemon checkup. This is a pretty good card. It is a card that already exists in standard format because there's a promo that came out in an Elite Trainer box, but it's coming out in the set, so I figure I might as well review it. It's actually indexed right now, already seeing play. It got top 4 at the Joinville Regional Championships in Brazil. It was being played in the Cloth Electrode deck, which uses Brute Bonnet to inflict poison on both Cloth and the defending Pokemon. Pecharunt can be a way to finish off Pokemon with poison damage, and can also be a way to take turn 1 knockouts against little Pokemon like Ralts and Charmander. You can use Brute Bonnet to poison and then, retreat or switch into Pecharunt. And if you get a Radiant Hisuian Sneasler into play, then you're going to be inflicting, 8 damage counters of poison on the first turn of the game. So you can take turn 1 knockouts with Toxic Subjugation by inflicting poison and just leaving Pecharunt in the active. It's a cool card. We've got a new Eternatus on the way. This is the first non-rule box Eternatus card that has ever been printed. There was Radiant Eternatus, there was Eternatus VMAX, and now finally we have got the Plain Jane Eternatus. 150 hit point dragon Pokemon with 2 attacks. Dynablast costs 1 darkness energy and does 10 damage, plus 80 if your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon EX. So 90 damage to Pokemon EX. World's End costs a fire and 2 darkness energy and does 230 damage. Discard a Stadium in order to use the attack, and if you can't, this attack does nothing. What's funny about this Eternatus is that it feels like a year late. This card would be really good in Lost Box decks, right? Like 230 damage. In a Lost Box deck, you could easily use Mirage Gate to accelerate a fire and a darkness energy to your Eternatus. 230 damages, taking a lot of key knockouts. Yeah, 150 HP. In Gym Leader Challenge, you could certainly power up Eternatus with a Double Dragon Energy and a Mela or a Raihan. 230 damage in the Dragon Gym Leader Challenge deck is phenomenal. Obviously, Dynablast isn't going to be doing squat because there's no EX Pokemon allowed in Gym Leader Challenge format. But World's End is a very high power level attack and would be probably one of the strongest attacks that Dragon has in its available card pool. And I think that this card will see some play in Dragon GLC decks. Oh, this is one of the worst Tera Pokemon I've ever had the mispleasure of reading. Tatsugiri EX, 160 HP, and it's got 2 attacks. First attack, Sneaky Pump. For a fire and a water, does 100 damage. And this attack's damage ignores all effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. 2 for 100 on my 160 hit point Pokemon EX. That's a big no thank you. All right, let's see what else we got. Cinnabar Lure. For a fire, a water, and a darkness energy, look at the top 10 cards of your deck, choose any number of Pokemon you find there, and put them onto your bench. Then shuffle the other cards back into your deck. In a similar way to Lapras EX, this card is not going to be potent enough to be able to win you a game. I mean, if you get to the point where you have powered up your 160 hit point 2 Prizer and use Cinnabar Lure, and then you randomly look at the top 10 cards of your deck, there better be some broken cards you find there to put into play. The cool thing about this is that it does allow you to instantly pop Stage 2 Pokemon into play. Yes, that's the cool thing about it. But getting those Stage 2 Pokemon into play better win you the game. There better be some Exodia level combination that you are getting into play, because if you start attacking on turn 3, like I've been saying this entire review, standard format, 3 to 4 turn games, that's it. You're offering up a 2 prize Pokemon into the active spot for the hope that you get some broken Stage 2 Pokemon into play. It's absolutely not happening. And then your opponent's going to be most of the way done winning the game by the time you get those dudes into play. So whatever dudes you get into play, you're starting on like turn 3. Because what, are you going to get the turn 1 Cinnabar Lure? No, you're not. You're lying to yourself if you think you're getting the turn 1 Cinnabar Lure. You'd have to go turn 1 Crystal Crispin, right? It's probably not happening. What if you get the turn 2 Cinnabar Lure? Then that means by turn 3, you get to finally start attacking with all your broken Pokemon in play that hopefully you find in the top 10 cards of your deck. That's not a guarantee, by the way. Your opponent's already probably knocked out the wimpy 160 hit point Tatsugiri anyway. It's just terrible. Big boy, Slaking EX. Colorless Stage 2 Pokemon, 340 hit points, and it's got the Slacking Off ability, which says if your opponent has no Pokemon EX or Pokemon V in play, this Pokemon cannot attack. All right, and it's got the Great Swing attack, which costs 2 colorless energy and does 280 damage. You have to discard an energy from this Pokemon. You can use this attack with a double turbo energy, which would decrease the damage output to 260, which is significantly worse than 280 because 280 hits key knockouts against Pokemon V-Star and Pidgeot EX. 260, not so much. So you're probably going to want to play this with basic energy or maybe jet energy to help you move your slacking in and out of the active spots. The beef I have with this card is that Slacking Off ability. Why does Slacking always have abilities that make it worse? It's just kind of part of the deal. In formats past, you would have absolutely played this card with Path to the Peak. And Path to the Peak is the card that was played alongside Slacking V. Slacking V had a similarly annoying ability, but Path to the Peak is no longer legal in standard format. So that's not great. What you can do, though, you can't even use the no-good Gastrodon to turn its ability off because Gastrodon doesn't stop the ability in the active spot. This is how bad Gastrodon is. It's not even good at doing the thing it ought to do in the set. It ought to turn off the slacking so that you can use it, but it doesn't. It's a fine drawback ability. I mean, most Pokemon TCG decks are going to have EX Pokemon in play. Slaking does have 340 HP, though. It's a big guy, gonna be tough to knock out. It's an okay card. Not exceptional. Listen, I spent way too long on stream trying to make Mousehold EX work. Mousehold EX is a terrible card, and Mousehold from Surging Sparks is not going to fix it. Sorry. Big T, Terapagos, 120 hit point turtle with the Prism Charge attack. Search your deck for up to 3 basic energy, all of different types, and attach them to your Tera Pokemon in any way you like. You could use Prism Charge to power up your Pikachu EX if you wanted to in your Pikachu Blissey deck. The Joltik only has 30 hit points, so it's possible that Terapagos is actually a better setup Pokemon for that Pikachu Blissey deck than the Joltik, because Joltik is just kind of a weak guy. And then you could actually use Glass Trumpet to accelerate energy onto Terapagos as well, since it is a colorless Pokemon. I like this card. It's a nice setup card. Nice, wholesome setup card. Feels good. All right, Hydreigon Copers in the chats. This is how we'll make Hydreigon work. Oh, okay. New item card, Mystery Set. Allows you to look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You can put them back in any order, or shuffle those cards and put them on the bottom of your deck. This is an interesting turbo-style item, and nothing like this has really been printed before, so I say it's interesting because it is unique. It's got a unique effect. It makes it so that your draw is somewhat optimized in a way. If you're playing a card that draws cards off the top of your deck, like Colress's Experiment or Professor's Research, or if you're about to use an ability that draws cards off the top of the deck, like Trade, or even your Teal Mask Ogerpon, you can take a look at what those cards are going to be, and you can reorder them to make sure that you draw into them. Or if you don't like the cards that you see, you can put them on the bottom of your deck so that you see a different card entirely. I think that this card's got potential in both Standard and Gym Leader Challenge formats. Gym Leader Challenge decks are, really liking item-based engines. I mean, there's a lot of different turbo-style items that exist in Gym Leader Challenge format. Being able to manipulate your draw in some kind of way is cool. I don't know if Mystery Set really stands up to all of the great items that have been released since Black and White, but in Standard format, this is a turbo-style item, and the formats is a turbo-style format. This card could see some play. I do think that Trekking Shoes is probably just the better card right now, but you could even play Mystery Set with Trekking Shoes, and then, you could see what cards you're about to trek into before you trek. So, maybe. We've got some new Berry Tool cards that are like very hyper-specific tech cards. They decrease damage that your Pokemon take from specific types of Pokemon, and they only last for a single turn that your Pokemon endures an attack. Colbur Berry decreases the damage that your Pokemon takes from Darkness Pokemon by 60. And then once you take a hit, you have to discard the Colbur Berry. And the Babiri Berry decreases damage that you take from Metal Pokemon. Metal Pokemon are not as big of a deal in Standard right now as Darkness Pokemon, but if you got Charizard EX problems, Colbur Berry could be a solution. I mean, you could tech for Charizard EX. Charizard EX historically hits pretty exact math in a lot of situations, and the Colbur Berry certainly accounts for a wide range. I mean, decreasing the damage that you take by 60 is pretty wild. The issue with a card like Colbur Berry is that Charizard decks are usually being paired with Pidgeot EX, which means that you could use Pidgeot EX to search for the answer to Colbur Berry. You could find the Vacuum, or you could find the Jamming Tower, though Jamming Tower and Vacuum stocks are pretty low right now. Not a lot of decks are actually running those. It'd be more likely that your opponent would just try to gust around the Pokemon with Colbur Berry attached in order to take the win. These are some interesting design cards, and I think that there could be a place for them in standard format. New technical machine tool is being released as well, and I love that they're not totally writing off this new mechanic already. They're continuing to print technical machines throughout the block. Great! I hope that they continue to print technical machines until the end of the Scarlet and Violet block. Technical machine Fluorite is a tool you could attach to give the Pokemon it's attached to an attack. Fluorite, for a grass, a water, and a psychic energy, you have to discard all energy from this Pokemon, but you get to heal all damage from each of your Tera Pokemon. So, yeah. We live in a one-hit KO world. I don't really think that sacking 3 energy to heal all your Tera Pokemon is a winning strategy right now. Serrano is a supporter that allows you to search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon EX, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Serrano could be good in the same way that Adventurer's Discovery was good for a brief time in Arceus V-Star decks. Adventurer's Discovery allows you to search your deck for 3 Pokemon V and put them into your hand. This is the same exact effect, but with Pokemon EX. Adventurer's Discovery wasn't a great card, but it did fulfill a use in Arceus decks. And what made it good in Arceus decks is that when you put Arceus V-Star into play, you can use its V-Star power and then go get whatever you want out of your deck. So if there gets to be a time where getting a Pokemon EX kind of instantly gets you what you want out of your deck, I mean, Serrano can kind of set up your entire strategy in that way. I'm not saying that that combination exists in Standard yet. That combination with Arceus V-Star did not exist when this card was released, but at some point in the future, Serrano could be good. Clement's Wit is a supporter that allows you to heal 60 damage from each of your lightning Pokemon. I said it before and I'll say it again, healing is not a winning strategy in Standard right now because we live in one-hit KO land. Jasmine's Gaze is a new supporter card that says during your opponent's next turn, each of your Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. I actually think this card is cool. I like defensive cards a lot. I mean, you saw me raging about that Donphan earlier. I think defensive strategies are really cool. I played Goodra V-Star to multiple major events, okay? I top 64 at EUIC one year with Goodra V-Star. I like these strategies. I think they're cool. If I'm being realistic, Standard format doesn't seem like it's in a spot where defensive strategies are going to be effective. It really doesn't. I mean, you've got Roaring Moon EX can blow up anything. You've got Raging Bolt EX can blow up anything. You've got Dusknoir, literally blows up anything. I'm not exactly sure that decreasing damage that you take by 30 is going to be the strongest thing, especially on a supporter card. It only works for one turn. Something more meaningful during your turn. 30 less damage from attacks does feel a little underpowered, even in a format like Gym Leader Challenge. It's like 30 less damage. I mean, I could accomplish the same thing with a tool card. I would rather play a Pot Helmet. Well, how exciting is Exciting Stadium? Let's see. New Stadium card. Basic Pokemon in play, get plus 30 hit points. Oh! Why? Why do basic Pokemon need to get stronger? We've already got Raging Bolt. It's got 240 HP. You can already put a Bravery Charm on that sucker to give it 290 hit points. Why do we need to give Raging Bolt even more HP? I'm not even saying that this is going to be a card you would play in Raging Bolt, but why? Why? Tell me why. And then Gravity Mountain makes it so that stage 2 Pokemon in play get minus 30 hit points. Okay, so in the same breath, we've got Exciting Stadium, which gives your Raging Bolt plus 30 hit points, or any basic Pokemon you want. Blood Moon Ursaluna can have 290 HP, whatever. And you've got Gravity Mountain, which makes it so that stage 2 Pokemon get minus 30 HP. I think Gravity Mountain's actually a really good card. Gravity Mountain will definitely see play. Think about all those annoying stage 2 Pokemon with 330 HP. My golly, it would be great if I had a way to deal 30 extra damage to them. I mean, Gravity Mountain essentially does that. Think of it this way. Like Gravity Mountain says, your attacks do 30 more damage to stage 2 Pokemon. That's essentially what it says. It makes it so that they have 30 less hit points. So you only have to do 300 damage to knock out a Charizard EX. You only have to do 280 damage to knock out a Gardevoir EX. You only have to do 290 damage to knock out a Dragapult EX. So Gravity Mountain makes a lot of stage 2 Pokemon just fall into a much kinder realm than they were at previously. And Gravity Mountain also combos perfectly with that new Pikachu EX, because Pikachu EX does 300 damage. That's kind of a problem, because if you're going through all the trouble of setting up Pikachu EX and using this crazy Topaz Bolt attack, you want to take a one-hit KO. You do not want to have to two-hit KO a Pokemon with Topaz Bolt, okay? That's not what the attack is for. This attack is for one-hit KOing, smacking things. That's what this attack is supposed to do. You are not supposed to be using 2 Topaz Bolt to take out one Pokemon. 600 damage to knock out one Pokemon EX with 330 hit points would be ridiculous. So instead of that, you just combo Pikachu with the Gravity Mountain and make it so that your Pikachu only has to do that 300 damage so that you can get the KOs against Charizard EX, Gardevoir EX, and Dragapult EX. Gravity Mountain's very good. I don't think Exciting Stadium is as good as Gravity Mountain, but Gravity Mountain is kind of the real deal. The cards from Japan's Sylveon EX and Ceruledge EX decks will probably also be in our Surging Spark sets, so let's talk about these guys real quick. Azumarill is a great single prize attacker with the Twinkling Soap ability, which says that Double Edge can be used for just 1 Psychic Energy if you have any Tera Pokemon in play. And Double Edge does 230 damage, with the drawback being that Azumarill does 50 damage to itself. I think that Azumarill is actually the most promising new single prize attacker from Surging Sparks. So if you're somebody who hates playing multi-prize attackers and you want to play your single prize deck, I really think that Azumarill is the card for you. You do have to have a Tera Pokemon in play, and as it is right now, Tera Pokemon are all 2 prize Pokemon. They are all Pokemon EX. So you have to have a Tera Pokemon in play. But if you do, you can use Double Edge for just 1 Psychic Energy, 230 damage for 1 Psychic Energy. It's about as good as it gets for single prize attackers. Now, fortunately, there is a good solution to this, because you can just put Pikachu EX into play as your Tera Pokemon of choice. And the reason why Pikachu EX gets to be the Pokemon of choice is because it is the most difficult Tera Pokemon to knock out because of its Tenacious Heart ability, which makes it so that it can't be easily one-hit KO'd. So you can put Pikachu EX on the bench and then swing with your Azumarill and its Double Edge attack, cranking out 230 damage for just 1 Psychic Energy. I've seen lots of Azumarill lists from Japan. Some of them are playing Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX as the Tera Pokemon right now, but that's because Pikachu EX isn't released in Japan. It comes out in their Supercharged Breaker set, which is releasing next week. A lot of lists are playing the Noctowl engine as well to help string attacks together. So Azumarill is actually a pretty good single prize attacking option for standard format. So it looks like Sylveon EX will actually be in our Surging Spark set. Great. It's a Stage 1 Pokemon EX with 270 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Magical Charm, does 160 damage for a Psychic and 2 colorless energy, and during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon's attacks do 100 less damage. And then Angel Light costs a Water, a Lightning, and a Psychic energy, and you get to shuffle 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and all attached cards into their deck. If one of your Pokemon used Angel Light last turn, you can't use it this turn. Magical Charm is kind of a stinky attack. This would be a really good attack if it read that Sylveon takes 100 less damage from the opponent's attacks next turn, but that is not what it reads. Magical Charm makes it so that the defending Pokemon's attacks do 100 less damage. If your opponent just switches that Pokemon to the bench, that effect gets removed. So they have some way to manipulate that debuff on their attack. It's much stronger if the buff goes to Sylveon. Instead, the debuff goes to the defending Pokemon. That means if Sylveon actually takes a knockout with Magical Charm, then Sylveon doesn't get a defensive buff at all because the Pokemon that you put the debuff on gets knocked out. So that's why I don't like the effect going on the defending Pokemon instead of Sylveon. The attack would be much stronger if the effect went to Sylveon instead. Now, Angelite is the reason this card is getting any hype or looks interesting. Angelite allows you to just target 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and all attached cards and shuffle them all into the opponent's deck. That is a very disruptive attack. I think that Angelite could be a strong option for some decks, but it doesn't outright win you the game. And frankly, Magical Charm is not a good enough attack that I don't think that it is going to be outright winning you games either. So Angelite is very disruptive, but I am anxious to see what other evolutions get released in the upcoming Evolution Tera set, because you could build some sort of Evolution EX Tera box where you are using different Evolution EX Pokemon for different situations. This is the only one we have revealed right now. Angelite is a powerful option, but it's not winning you the game outright. So I do think you're going to have to combo Angelite with something that actually does something and not just like be annoying. I think Sylveon EX is really good at being annoying, but you're going to need to partner it with something that actually wins you the game. Something I really like about the evolutions is that they have access to this awesome Eevee with the boosted evolution ability, which says if this Pokemon is in the active spot, it can evolve during your first turn or during the turn it was put into play. That is great. I mean, getting to skip a turn ahead and potentially get a turn 1 attack is phenomenal. So I'm all for it. This is a busted Eevee. Tera Orb is an item card that just searches your deck for a Tera Pokemon and puts it into your hand. Free search is always good. I mean, there's been a lot of great free search item cards throughout the past. There was what was it? Cherish Ball. This reminds me a lot of Cherish Ball, which was an item card that searched out Pokemon GX for free. Cherish Ball saw play in quite a few decks. Tera Orb is not quite as good as Cherish Ball, as it only gets Tera Pokemon. It doesn't get all Pokemon EX. If it got all Pokemon EX, it would be on the same level as Cherish Ball, but Tera Orb's still not bad, and it'll certainly see play in some Tera decks. For Dragapult especially, if you've ever played Dragapult EX, then you know how annoying it is to have to play those Ultra Balls to go get your Dragapult into play. So Tera Orb being able to just go fetch the Dragapult for free is going to be a total game changer. Ceruledge EX is a really cool Stage 1 Fire-type Pokemon with 2 attacks. Its first attack, Abyssal Flame, costs 1 fire energy and does 30 damage, plus 20 more damage for each energy card in your discard pile. That is an infinite damage ceiling. Not truly infinite, okay, but it's a lot of damage. You could do a lot of damage with this. If you're playing a deck with like 17 energy in it, if you got 15 energy in the discard pile, you can use Abyssal Flame for 330 damage. That's 330 damage for just 1 fire energy. And there are lots of ways to get energy into the discard pile in Standard right now. You've got Radiant Greninja with concealed cards. You've got Squawkabilly EX with the Squawk and Seize ability. You've got Pokestop. You've got Earthen Vessel, which can discard an energy and go get 2 more energy out of your deck. You've got Ultra Ball. There are lots of ways to get those energy into the discard pile quickly to take big knockouts with Ceruledge EX. Now, Ceruledge also has the Amethyst Rage attack, which costs a fire, a psychic, and a metal energy, and it does 280 damage, with the downside that you have to discard all energy from this Pokemon. I don't think that second attack is ever worth using with Ceruledge EX. I think if you're playing the Ceruledge EX deck, you should absolutely try to attack with Abyssal Flame. It's a really good attack. It can do more damage than Amethyst Rage. I've actually gotten my hands on Ceruledge EX and have played it quite a bit already, and it is not uncommon to be swinging for 300 damage by turn 3. By turn 2, you're usually doing somewhere in the ballpark of 200 damage. The thing that Ceruledge has to contest with in Standard is that Standard's just so fast. Ceruledge is a deck that's probably going to be winning the game on turn 4. And there are lots of decks that can win the game on turn 3. So the fastest that Ceruledge can possibly win is turn 4, because turn 1, you're not going to be attacking for any meaningful amount of damage because you have to evolve in order to get Ceruledge into play. You could play Salvatore to get a turn 1 evolution into Ceruledge EX, but that's not a strategy that's going to be consistent enough to be worth using. So at the fastest, you can take 2 prizes on turn 2, 2 prizes on turn 3, and 2 prizes on turn 4. And there's a certain amount of decks that you will be able to beat by doing that. But it is a tough world out there in Standard right now, and even a card as high of a power level as Ceruledge is going to have a tough time navigating it. All right, let's check out Paradise Dragona. There's a new fire-type ancient card in town, Gouging Fire. It's got 130 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Lunge Out, costs a fire energy and does 30 damage. And then Blazing Support costs 2 fire and a colorless energy, and it does 100 damage plus 70 more damage if your opponent has 4 or fewer prize cards remaining. I don't see this card seeing any play in Standard format, as there are just better ancient cards to rely on for your Roaring Moon deck, or even your Gouging Fire deck. I don't think would bother playing this single prize attacker. But in Gym Leader Challenge format, it is worth noting that this is a very strong attacker. Being able to swing for 170 damage for 2/3 of the game in Gym Leader Challenge format is incredible. That is about as strong as it gets for basic fire-type Pokemon in GLC right now. And I love that you can play Gouging Fire in your Fire GLC deck alongside Entei. You know, Gym Leader Challenge is a singleton format, so you can only play one of each card with the same name. But, you know, obviously Entei and Gouging Fire are kind of cousins, or like related. They're ancient cousins or whatever. And I think it's really cool that both Entei and Gouging Fire are great single prize attackers for Gym Leader Challenge Fire decks. So that's cool. This is definitely a good card in GLC. Black Kyurem EX is a bulk Pokemon EX. He's got 230 HP, the Ice Age attack, which costs 3 colorless energy and does 90 damage. It does auto-paralyze, which is cool, right? Your opponent's active dragon Pokemon is now paralyzed. Sure. And then Black Frost costs 2 water and 2 colorless and does 250 damage, with the drawback being that Kyurem also does 30 damage to itself. I mean, auto paralysis for 3 energy on exclusively dragon Pokemon, I don't really see that being an effective way to win games. It is a thing that exists. Quaquaval, everybody's favorite water starter, right? Right? Everyone loves Quaquaval, right? Quaquaval is a stage 2 water-type Pokemon with the up-tempo ability, which says once during your turn, you may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. If you do, draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. That's a pretty nice ability. In Standard format right now, we've still got Bibarel, and Bibarel is kind of your quintessential draw engine, and Quaquaval is certainly not going to replace Bibarel. Bibarel is easier to get into play, and its ability is just as good. In Gym Leader Challenge format, you could set up Quaquaval to help you draw cards, but in GLC, you've already got Octillery, which has the Abyssal Hand ability, which is the same thing as Bibarel's Industrious Incisors. I really don't see a use case for Quaquaval at all. There are just other cards that do this better. All right, I know I said Magneton is one of my favorite cards in this set, but my other favorite card in this set is Smoochum. This card rules. This card is so good. This card is insane. In the same way that Cleffa ended up kind of being an all-star, right? It's a baby Pokemon, 30 hit points. It allows you to fill your hand to 7 cards for free, and it has free retreat. Smoochum is like in the same realm of awesomeness as Cleffa. It is a basic Pokemon with 30 hit points and free retreat, and the free attack Happy Kiss, which costs nothing. It's free, like I said. And it allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic psychic energy cards and attach them to one of your benched Pokemon. This is like a TM Turbo Energize for free. It's better than TM Turbo Energize because you don't have to get the tool out and you don't have to have an energy attached to the Smoochum in order to accelerate energy into play. So what that means is that with the turn 1 Smoochum, you can get 3 relevant energy allocated where you want them on your board because you can attach an energy from hand to an attacker that you want to use while keeping it safe on the bench. And you can use Happy Kiss to get 2 more psychic energy out of your deck and attach them to one of your benched Pokemon. Smoochum, I think, is a total rock star. I mean, this card could be good in standard decks that play psychic energy, and it can also be really good in Gym Leader Challenge decks. I see myself playing Smoochum in almost every one of my psychic GLC decks. I'll play Smoochum and Cleffa. I don't care. I'll give up those prize cards. It's worth it. These guys are so good. And honestly, I love the baby Pokemon aesthetic, mechanic, whatever you want to call it. It's not really a mechanic, but the baby Pokemon during this era have kind of all had 30 hit points. They all have free retreat and they all have free attacks. I kind of like that. I think it's a fun way to have baby Pokemon, and the concept of baby Pokemon exist in the Pokemon TCG right now. I'm all about it, and this is definitely one of the best ones they've printed recently. Latias EX is a Pokemon EX with 210 HP and the Skyline Chili ability, which says your basic Pokemon have no retreat cost. That's crazy. What? Really? I thought it only reduced the retreat cost by 1. Are you kidding me? And then it has an attack that does 200 damage. This is crazy. I mean, you could play this card in Raging Bolt decks. You could play this card in Miraidon decks. You could play this card in your Roaring Moon decks. It just gives them free retreat. Are you serious? I can't believe it. Honest to goodness, I thought that it reduced the retreat cost by like 1. That's just nuts. Imagine this. You play it in your Miraidon deck. You don't have to worry about finding switch cards anymore. All of the cards in your deck are basics. So you get Latias EX out. You can afford bench space for Latias EX because you're playing the new Pikachu EX with the Area Zero Underdepths Stadium card, and you're playing Area Zero Underdepths because that allows your Raikou V to be able to use Lightning Rondo for like 300 damage if the benches are filled. So Latias EX is just like an auto slide into your Miraidon EX deck. Also feels like it would be a good slide into your Raging Bolt deck. If you're playing Raging Bolt with Area Zero Underdepths, you already got your Teal Mask Ogerpon, which is a Tera Pokemon, so you could play Area Zero Underdepths in your Raging Bolt deck and then have a Latias EX on the bench, which gives all of your basic Pokemon free retreat. So that's also really good. And yeah, in Roaring Moon decks, I mean, Pecharunt EX is better in some ways, but also it does poison your guy. And if you don't want your Roaring Moon to be poisoned, I definitely have had that poison damage kind of bite me in the butt sometimes. Latias EX is also a great option. It literally gives all of your basic Pokemon free retreat. I really can't believe it. This is just crazy. Sorry, Flygon enjoyers. This card is also not good. Flygon. Fighting type, stage 2 Pokemon EX, 310 HP. It's got the Stormy Retreat attack, which costs a fighting energy, and it does 130 damage. And then you may switch this Pokemon with a Pokemon on your bench. Hit and run, not good, especially when your hit and run is only doing 130 damage. There are a million ways to gust your opponent's Pokemon in Standard right now. Boss's Orders, Pokemon Catcher, Counter Catcher, Prime Catcher, Iron Bundle, whatever. There are way too many ways to bring up your opponent's bench Pokemon and swing into them. Not to mention, Storming Retreat isn't knocking out squat. I mean, 130 damage is terrible. You're not even hitting 2-hit KOs with Stormy Retreat. It's like pitiful how bad of an attack this is. At the very minimum, you need to be 2-hit KOing things, but Stormy Retreat is like a 3-hit KO. And then Sonic Peridot costs a water, a fighting, and a metal, and it does 100 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. That sounds cool until you remember that many of the best Pokemon EX in standard format right now are, say it with me, Tera Pokemon. And what do we know about Tera Pokemon? They cannot be damaged on the bench. So Sonic Peridot doesn't even hit Charizard EX on the bench. It doesn't hit Teal Mask Ogerpon on the bench. It doesn't even damage Teal Mask Ogerpon on the bench. It's terrible. It's terrible. Get it? Archaludon EX, Big Bridge Man, 300 hit point stage 1 Pokemon EX with the Alloyed build ability, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may attach up to 2 basic metal energy from your discard pile to your metal Pokemon in any way you like. And then the Metal Defender attack costs 3 metal energy, and it does 220 damage, and it gives you the buff that during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon has no weakness. I like this card. I think metal Pokemon are cool. I think tanky strategies are cool. Archaludon EX is a tanky boy. 300 HP on a stage 1 Pokemon that's a beefy dude right there. Gonna be tough to knock out. You turn off your own weakness. That means Radiant Charizard can't even one-hit KO you. You can play Turo Scenario, so you can swing with Archaludon EX and then soak a hit and then use Turo Scenario to pick up Archaludon EX and then re-evolve one of your Duraludon and then boom, use Alloy build, attach energy from your discard pile, and keep going. The problem with Archaludon is that we live in a one-hit KO world, and Raging Bolt EX exists, and it is tough for your tanky decks out there, okay? Because the Pokemon Company has been printing cards that just annihilate things. Your Roaring Moons, your Raging Bolts, these are basic Pokemon that just do infinite damage for 3 energy. It's tough to be a tanky boy that only does 220 damage, right? I mean, you're an evolved Pokemon that can't withstand hits from basic Pokemon. How bad does that feel? Power level wise, how bad does that feel? Archaludon is going to be only as good as it can survive hits. If it can survive hits, it's dealing 220 damage a turn. It's not necessarily one-hit KOing things either. It's going to have to survive lots of hits in order to keep up in the fast-paced standard metagame. I think this card is cool. There's also the single prize Archaludon, which can give your Pokemon with metal energy attached free retreat, so that's nice. And you can pivot between various Archaludon. I had a version of this deck with Revavroom that I was playing, and it was a lot of fun. You can use Revavroom, Rumbling Engine, discard an energy, and then fill your hand to 6, and then you can use Alloy build to accelerate those energy right back into play. Archaludon EX, I think, is a fine card. It's not absolutely terrible, but, you know, I'd be really excited if it did big things at tournaments, but I don't really expect that with how easy it is to take one-hit KOs right now. Speaking of one-hit KOs, we've got Alolan Exeggutor EX, a new Stage 1 Dragon-type Pokemon with 300 HP and 2 attacks. Tropical Fever costs a grass and water, does 150 damage, and you can choose any number of basic energy from your hand and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. This kind of attack typically has not been very good, and I don't think it is any good now. There are better ways to accelerate energy into play. And then Swinging Sphere costs a grass, a water, and a fighting energy, and then you flip a coin. If heads, knock out your opponent's active basic Pokemon. If tails, knock out one of your opponent's benched basic Pokemon. I don't think a standalone Exeggutor EX deck is the way to go. Honestly, if you're up against non-basic decks, Swinging Sphere is not very effective, and Tropical Fever is only doing 150 damage. So you could play Alolan Exeggutor EX in your Regidrago V-Star deck, sure. But there's almost always attacks that are better for doing whatever you need to do. And Alolan Exeggutor is kind of like a funny option if you're playing against like a Raging Bolt deck with your Regidrago V-Star deck, sure. because they're always going to have a basic in the active or a basic on the bench. If you're playing against like Miraidon, sure, right? An interesting option for your Regidrago V-Star deck against big basic decks, but is it worth the include? Probably not. This Dialga is actually awesome for Gym Leader Challenge formats, and I'm really stoked to see Dragon get some more tools for GLC formats, in that Dragon Pokemon seem to be kind of rarely printed during the Scarlet and Violet block. Dialga's got a nice, respectable 130 HP and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Time Control, costs a colorless energy and allows you to search your deck for 2 cards and stack them on top of your deck in any order. That's phenomenal. And then Buster Tail costs a Psychic and a Metal Energy, and also a colorless energy, so 3 energy, and it does 160 damage. Lots of Pokemon in the Dragon GLC deck do 160 damage. This is fine. And you share an attack requirement with Ultra Necrozma, which is another powerful Dragon Pokemon for the Dragon pool. So it's nice to have those two that can both utilize the same types of energy. Time Control is nice because you can stack your deck. You can go turn 1, Time Control, stack Research, Double Dragon. Next turn, draw into Research, play Research. Here's my Double Dragon. That's a turn 2 Buster Tail for 160. Turn 2, 160 in GLC. It's about as good as it gets. So I love it. This has got to be one of the worst Tera Pokemon to exist. It's not as bad as Tatsugiri EX, but it's down there. Cyclizar EX, 210 hit point, colorless Pokemon with 2 attacks. Its first attack, Breakthrough, costs 3 colorless energy, and it does 130 damage and 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That is weak. That's weak. And then Zircon Road costs a Grass, a Fire, and a Psychic, does 180 damage, and you could draw 5 cards. Not worth it for the attack cost. Time for more trainers and supporters. We've got some new items. I hate this card. Helper Bell. You can only use this card if you go second and only on your first turn. Hate it. I hate cards that you can only play on the first turn of the game. They're so stupid. They clutter up deck building, and they are indicative of the turbo fast format that we have in Standard right now. I absolutely hate this kind of card design. You get to search your deck for a supporter card and put it into your hand. All right, and then it's a dead card for the rest of the game. Can't stand it. I wish this kind of thing didn't exist, and I hope that Pokemon stops printing these kinds of cards. Dusk Ball is an item card kind of like Great Ball, but you get to look at the bottom of your deck instead. Look at the bottom 7 cards of your deck, reveal a Pokemon you find there, and put it into your hand. Neato. I expect this card to be just as good as Great Ball is. Disruptive Letter is an item card. Says your opponent counts how many cards they have in their hand, shuffles them, puts them at the bottom of their deck, and then draws that many cards. This type of effect has existed before. There was Peaking Red Card, which did see some small amount of play. It's funny because with a card like this, you can catch your opponent slipping. You ever see your opponent play their entire hand down to like 1 or 2 cards, and you know that the card that they have in their hand is like a research, right? Well, say your opponent does that, and then, you know, they limit their hand to 2 cards, leaving themselves with a research for next turn. Then you play the Disruptive Letter, put it to the bottom of the deck, get the next 2 cards, right? And then they dead draw. But the thing is, in Standard format right now, hand disruption is not real. Mew EX exists, Radiant Greninja exists, Teal Mask Ogerpon exists, and Pheasantipity EX exists. Hand disruption is at an all-time low, which is crazy. Crazy. They just printed Iono in Paldea Evolved. Comeback mechanics and all that were supposed to be like a major part of the Scarlet and Violet Pokemon TCG set. It feels like with printing Pheasantipity EX and Mew EX, they have just completely thrown all hand disruption out the window. So it's a terrible time to be a hand disruption card. Dragon's Potion is an item card that allows you to heal 60 damage from your active Dragon Pokemon. Very neat. Let's go next. Pasho Berry is one of those defensive berries, but it decreases the damage that your Pokemon takes from water Pokemon. Extremely neat. Counter Gain is back, and this is a big card. Counter Gain is quite good. It's a tool card that makes it so that the Pokemon that it's attached to has its attack cost reduced by 1 colorless, so long as you're behind on prizes. So you can make powerful attacks easier to use with counter gain. And there are cards in Standard that can make it so that you are behind on prizes, like Dusknoir, the new Magneton, cards that sack a prize, can activate counter gain, making it so that you can attack 1 turn quicker. It's a good card, and I think it's going to see play, just like it saw play the first time it was Standard legal. Supporters. Drayton allows you to look at the top 7 cards of your deck, reveal a Pokemon and a trainer card you find there, and put them into your hand. I don't love it. It's like the Great Ball of supporters. I'd rather play a supporter card that allowed me to go get something specific. I'd even rather play Bill's Analysis, which allows you to look at the top 7 cards of your deck and put 2 trainer cards you find there into your hand. A single trainer and a single Pokemon, it's not great. Surfer is quite good. Supporters that give you a switching out have been good in Standard. I mean, allowing you to draw cards and switch at the same time, that's just great. I'm reminded of Birdkeeper from formats past, which saw quite a bit of play. Surfer allows you to switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon and then draw until you have 5 cards in your hand. I would say that Surfer is not quite as powerful as Birdkeeper. Birdkeeper giving you the switch effect and then draw 3 is, I'd say, marginally better than a Field of 5, though you could make an argument for either one. There are obviously some scenarios where Surfer would be better than Birdkeeper, but then there are some scenarios where Birdkeeper is better than Surfer. So Surfer is about in that same power level of supporter as Birdkeeper, and I think a welcome addition to Standard. Drasna. Shuffle your hand into your deck and flip a coin. If heads, draw 8 cards. If tails, draw 3 cards. I am reminded of Gambler from the Fossil expansion. This isn't as bad as Gambler, but, the upside of 8, the downside of 3. Are you feeling lucky? And then, you guys know how I've been saying that there are a million ways to bring your opponent's bench Pokemon into the active spot? Well, now there's 1,000,001. Lycia's Appeal. Switch in one of your opponent's benched basic Pokemon to the active spot. The new active Pokemon is now confused. A neat take on the already busted formula of supporter cards bringing up bench Pokemon into the active spot. The confusion effect, I mean, how much of a difference is that really going to make when we're using Gust cards in Standard? We're really just trying to bring Pokemon into the active spot to knock them out. So, funny enough, Lycia's Appeal could play a bigger role in Gym Leader Challenge format because it's another supporter-based Gust card that can be played alongside Boss's Orders and Guzma. So now in GLC, you've got Lycia's Appeal, Guzma, and Boss's Orders. So if you have a deck where you wanted to play 3 guaranteed Gust options, you could do that, since you can't play multiple of the same card in GLC. In Standard, I do see Boss's Orders just being the better card. The Confusion edition, like I said, doesn't really matter because we exist in a one-hit KO format. So not really a card that's going to be great in Standard unless Boss's Orders rotates. If Boss's Orders rotates, then whoopee! I actually think it would be great for the game if Boss's Orders did rotate. Probably be great for the game if all Pokemon with over 200 hit points rotated as well, but that's a conversation for a different day. Let's talk about the Ace Specs. All right, it's Ace Spec time. Let's review all of the brand new shiny and pink Ace Specs we're going to get in Surging Sparks. First up, we've got Energy Search Pro. Search your deck for any number of basic energy of different types, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Finally, a card for my Grafaiai deck, or Grafii, or whatever. You could also play this with Golden Go, all right? Golden Go EX. You could find the Energy Search Pro and then, boom, go get a bunch of different energy out of your deck and then make it rain and discard all of them. Sure. Megaton Blower. I don't want to waste my A-Spec on a field blower, man. Discard all Pokemon tool cards and special energy attached to each of your opponent's Pokemon, and discard any state even play. All right, this is a lot better than field blower. I was lying. I mean, they don't call it the Megaton blower for nothing. All special energy? I mean, sure. Like I said earlier with the Ceruledge, this effect is like exclusively good against Lugia, but it is kind of neat. I mean, I guess if there became a situation where removing all of this stuff is really good, then Megaton blower is the A-Spec for you. Rich Energy provides a colorless energy, and when you attach it from your hand to one of your Pokemon, draw 4 cards. Draw 4! It's kind of nice. Is it as good as other cards like Legacy Energy? Probably not, but who doesn't like drawing 4 cards? Perfect Mixer, which apparently is being translated to Beautiful Blender, allows you to search your deck for up to 5 cards and discard them. It's crazy to think that Battle Compressor was just an item card you could play 4 of in your deck and allowed you to discard 3 cards from your deck. Beautiful Blender is an increase of 2. Discard 5. Feels bad. Battle Compressor was like one of the most broken item cards ever printed, but Beautiful Blender is nice for decks that want to send cards to the discard pile, like Ceruledge EX. Being able to increase the damage you're dealing with Abyssal Flame by 100 is quite good. You could play this in Lugia. Are you going to take out that Legacy Energy? You probably don't want to do that. I mean, Legacy Energy is a pretty good card, but Beautiful Blender could make it, more convenient to get Archeops into the discard pile for Lugia's Summoning Star. Precious Carrier allows you to search your deck for any number of basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. So, kind of the craziest battle VIP pass you ever did see. The craziest Buddy Poffin. I don't think the Precious Carrier is worth playing, because cards like Buddy Poffin and Nest Ball exist. Just play those. I mean, yeah, if you have an Area 0 Underdepths in play and a Tera Pokemon in play, you could Precious Carrier to fill your bench to 8. This is an effect that can be replicated easily by other item cards. Just play your Nest Balls and your Buddies and fill your bench that way. And then use your A-Spec on something that's totally broken and provides an effect that cannot be replicated any other way. Like Scramble Switch. Scramble Switch is so back right now. What a crazy card. It's a switch. It's an energy switch. It's a game changer. It's a playmaker. Scramble Switch says you get to switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. Then you can move as many energy attached to the old active Pokemon to the new active Pokemon as you like. This card is really good in decks that play like tank and heal strategies. It is. And it was played in Primal Groudon EX decks back in the day because Primal Groudon EX was very difficult to knock out. So Primal Groudon would soak a hit, and then you could move all the energy to a new Primal Groudon. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world right now where Pokemon are difficult to knock out. We live in a world where everything is getting knocked out in one hit, which means that cards like Scramble Switch are not quite as powerful as they would be in a tank and heal kind of format. You can do things like Scramble Switch energy off of one Pokemon, then Turo that Pokemon up to heal it, like that kind of stuff. You could still use Scramble Switch effectively in decks to act as an energy switch. I mean, you could even play this in Regidrago V-Star decks just to help move energy onto your Regidrago V-Star, right? Because if you've got like a Teal Mask Ogerpon with 2 grass energy on it, boom, Scramble Switch onto the Regidrago, here's a fire, and I'm swinging. So Scramble Switch is definitely really good in decks like that. Any deck that plays Energy Switch might also consider Scramble Switch. Is it better than Prime Catcher? I would say no. However, it is at least worth considering in decks like that. Amulet of Hope is a tool card. Says if the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you may search your deck for up to 3 cards and put them into your hand. Hello, Radiant Jirachi. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the Amulet of Hope and I'm going to put it on my Radiant Jirachi and I'm going to tell my opponent, you must knock me out, please. And when they do, I'm going to search my deck for 6 game-breaking cards and I'm going to win the game. This is a very funny card. I don't really like it because it's a reactive card. It's not a proactive card. It's a card that gets triggered by your opponent. Your opponent has to swing into it. So if you're dead drawing and you have the Amulet of Hope in the active spot, your opponent could just be like, I'm not going to take that, right? I'm not going to give you those 3 cards. And you're giving your opponent too much power over the game. Whereas if you're playing a proactive card like Prime Catcher, you get to take an action on the game as soon as you play it. I think Amulet of Hope is kind of cheesy. I mean, it's about as good as Radiant Jirachi. Miraculous Intercom is an item card that allows you to choose up to 2 supporter cards from your discard pile and put them into your hand. It's crazy to think that we just had Versus Seeker, which allowed you to just get a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. And that was just a item that exists, and you played 4 of them, and you could just get whatever supporter you wanted at any point in time. Is Miraculous Intercom better than Palpad? Yeah. Slightly. It gets the supporters back to hand. Palpad puts them into the deck. But you know what Palpad has going for it is that it's not one of these pink A-specs. So Palpad is probably just going to be the preferred card. You just play Palpad instead, put the supporters back into your deck, and then go find them. However, Miraculous Intercom is just not a great A-spec, unfortunately. And we have done it. That does it for the Scarlet and Violet Surging Sparks set review. Thank you all so much for watching. If you are interested in getting your hands on cards from Surging Sparks, make sure to check out the pre-orders for Surging Sparks sealed product available at fullgripgames.com. Shopping at fullgripgames.com directly supports the content that I create here on Tricky Gym. Hopefully you enjoyed the set review. Let me know what you think of the upcoming set in the comments below. Y'all take it easy and have a good one. See ya.